Private First Class Jack Miller was captured in early July 1944, less than a month after landing in Normandy. He belonged to the 116th Infantry Regiment, 29th Division, and had already been in combat long enough to understand how quickly things could go wrong. His platoon had been pushing through hedgerows east of St. Lai when a German counterattack, supported by mortar fire, broke their line. In the confusion, Miller was separated from his squad. By the time the firing died down, he was alone. Miller spent the afternoon moving cautiously through the hedgerows, avoiding open ground and listening for voices. He had lost his rifle during a crawl through a ditch and carried only his sidearm and a single magazine. Near dusk, as rain began to fall, he crossed a narrow farm road and ran directly into a German patrol. 3 soldiers appeared from behind a stone wall, rifles already raised. There was no opportunity to run. Miller raised his hands and was disarmed without a word. He later recalled that the capture itself was strangely calm. The Germans searched him quickly, taking his helmet, his dog tags, and his remaining ammunition. One soldier cut the laces from his boots and used them to bind Miller's wrists. They spoke little, but their urgency suggested they were as nervous as he was. American artillery could be heard in the distance, and the front line was clearly unstable. Miller was marched along the road to a nearby farm where several German vehicles were staged. Among them was an Opel Blitz cargo truck, its engine running to keep it from stalling in the damp air. The Germans appeared to be gathering prisoners and equipment from movement farther east. Miller was pushed toward the truck and ordered to sit on the ground near the rear wheels. For the next half hour, he waited. Other prisoners never arrived. German soldiers moved back and forth, shouting to one another, responding to radio calls Miller could not understand. Shellfire drew closer, and several times the men took cover before realizing the rounds were landing elsewhere. The tension was constant, but disorganized. Miller understood that once he was loaded onto the truck and driven away, escape would be nearly impossible. He was tired, soaked, and frightened, but he watched carefully. He noticed that the truck driver had left his seat to help unload crates in a nearby barn. The keys remained in the ignition. The moment came suddenly. American artillery landed close enough to shake the ground and rattle the truck's wooden sides. The German soldier guarding Miller turned his head toward the impact. The grip on Miller's arm loosened. Miller did not plan the escape in advance. He acted on instinct. He drove his shoulder into the guard's chest, knocking him backward, and dove behind the truck as rifle fire erupted. Bullets struck the dirt and the truck's frame. Miller scrambled into the cab, still expecting at any moment to be shot through the back. The engine was already running. He released the clutch poorly, stalling once before restarting. The truck lurched forward as he pressed the accelerator, clipping one of the soldiers and sending him into the mud. Within seconds, Miller was speeding down the road, hunched low over the wheel, rain and smoke blurring his vision. He later said the most frightening part of the escape was not being shot at, but realizing he now had to drive a German vehicle through territory still controlled by German forces. He wore an American uniform, no helmet, and had no identification. He slowed the truck and turned off the headlights as darkness fell, relying on moonlight and the pale outline of the road. Twice he passed small groups of German soldiers marching in the opposite direction. Neither challenged him. Near midnight, he encountered a roadblock manned by 2 sentries. Miller stopped the truck, convinced his escape had ended. One sentry approached and asked for papers in German. Miller did not understand the words, but the tone was impatient rather than suspicious. Before he could respond, American artillery struck nearby. The sentry swore, waved his arm, and shouted for Miller to move on. Miller drove through without speaking. Several miles later, unsure of his position and afraid of running into another checkpoint, Miller drove the truck into a ditch beside a field and abandoned it. He moved on foot through wet grass and shallow streams until dawn, following the distant sound of American guns. At first light, he approached American lines with his hands raised. Nervous infantrymen nearly shot him when they saw the German truck behind him, but he was quickly identified and pulled to safety. He was exhausted, dehydrated, and shaken, but uninjured. Miller returned to his unit 2 days later. His experience was recorded briefly in company notes, then largely forgotten. Like many such escapes, it was as much a story about confusion as it was courage.